Blog Talk Radio. Today is Monday, April 16th, 2018, and this is Foxology. I am Silver Ray Fox, your host. Happy Monday greetings to you, or happy day to you for those of you who listen on a different day and time. Either way, I am excited and pleased to know that you came by to check out the show, and it is always my hope that as a result you get some good information to take away with you too. Yes, that's what I want you to do. Listen in, listen up, pack up some of what you hear, what you learn, and take it with you. It might be a nugget of truth, some wisdom, some understanding, some enlightenment, something you can use. You know, I always say that I like to know at least a little bit about a lot of things. You know, it's really kind of powerful when you do. But, you know, if you keep your ears open, you'll see that all around you that's available. And here on Foxology, too, you'll find that you'll get something to put in your big bag of knowledge. I talk to a lot of people who know what they're doing and who know where they're going, who've been places in life and work, and who can share their expertise and experience with us. Yes. My guest today is another of those doing extraordinary things on a daily basis. Cassandra Harris-Gray is an expert in the field of mental and emotional health. She is a marriage and family therapist and the CEO and clinical director at Creative Spirits Behavior Health Centers located in Louisville, Kentucky, and she is my very special guest today. And we're going to be talking about gun violence in our schools and the issues of PTSD. Welcome, Cassandra.
Hello.
How are you today?
I am doing wonderful. It's snowing here, but it's a beautiful day.
Yes, I tell you, that weather really did kick in. I hope it's the last of it, but, you know, depending on where you live, you just can't count on that. I looked outside because I'm in Wisconsin right now, and I thought, okay, I thought it was spring, and it's been snowing for almost 2 days. How crazy is that? But, okay, that'll give you a little stress, if not a lot, for sure. But I want to thank you for coming on the show today to talk about what I think is a real important issue. As I pondered some of my questions, you know, I really do think those of you who work in this particular field are really just really incredible people. I sat here thinking to myself, you know, it's not a lot for us to try to manage our own situations and come up with solutions, but to help others on a daily basis to do that is pretty awesome. So I commend the work that you're doing. Those of you that all over across the board who are working in the field of mental health, emotional health, it's such a critical area right now. So thank you, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I'd like to start with what will probably be an easy question for you, but just so that we lay the right foundation with this, would you give us a clinical definition of what PTSD is?
So when we talk about PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, and what happens with post-traumatic stress, there has been a trauma or a traumatic event that has happened with a person, and with this particular disorder, a person is having difficulty recovering after experiencing or witnessing it. So it could be something that happened in your childhood, or for Army vets, it could be something that has happened on the field. And after the fact, after you come back and you return, or some time has passed, the traumatic event begins to impact you in various ways. So it's an after effect. It's a trauma that has already happened, but after it has happened, you have difficulty recovering, and you continue to experience or experience the symptoms and effect from the trauma.
Mm-hmm. How does that compare with some of the initial shock a person may be experiencing over an event? You said a couple of times in your description that it's an effect afterward. I imagine it's often immediate, but it seemed like you may have indicated that a lot of times it's later on, and perhaps later on in life.
That's correct. So there's some that it impacts immediately after. Some it can be some time has passed on that. But when we talk about post trauma, it is an after effect. It is after the trauma has happened, and I'm having difficulty overcoming the traumatic shock that has happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us how it's recognized? And let's start first with talking about in adults. How is it recognized in adults? What are some of the symptoms? Not that we should try to self-diagnose, but what would be some of the recognizable symptoms in general? I imagine depending on what the trauma was, it could be very different. But what are some of the general things that are recognizable?
So when we talk about symptomology and trying to see to determine if a person is dealing with PTSD, we try to look for a couple of areas. One, we try to distinguish cognitive and mood symptoms. If a person's having trouble remembering, if they're having negative thoughts about oneself or about the world, if they're starting to have some what we call distorted feelings, feeling excessively guilty or blaming themselves for where they are, if there's a loss of interest in pleasurable activities, those are some things that can impact you cognitively. Some things that we also notice in the arousal symptom is looking at if I'm easily startled, if I'm constantly feeling tension and I'm on edge, difficulty sleeping, and having some angry outbursts, and I don't understand where that's coming from. I just feel tense. I just feel angry. I don't understand where it's coming from. And some of the other symptoms that we see is when you're trying to avoid places, you're trying to avoid thoughts, or the thoughts may come up and you're trying to constantly push the thoughts down of the trauma. Some people experience flashbacks. Some people have what we call a frightening dreams. And then some people just experience what we call frightening thoughts. Symptomology of it's many symptoms that we see. As therapists, we try to look to see if there's at least one or two experiencing symptoms. If there's an avoidance symptom, if we see that there's some arousal and reactivity symptoms, and if we see that cognitively and the mood symptoms, if we see at least two of those, then we know, this person could possibly be dealing with PTSD.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, with all that being said, in light of recent events, let's go ahead and go there regarding the gun violence and PTSD. The children who are impacted by this are obviously, it's very widespread. Didn't have to happen actually to you or at your school. We can see that how it has reached a very heightened level of awareness. But those that were up close, that this has hit them in a real personal way, let's start talking about them. And then continue the dialogue, Cassandra, if you would, regarding the families, the staff. And I would really have to say it's impacted all of us in some way that it's created, and certainly not the extensive clinical definition that you just gave of PTSD. But we're living in a society now where when we know these things so immediately, we see them, we experience it, we go to the funerals online and TV and all of that stuff. A lot of this is extremely difficult to understand, make any kind of sense of. And so I think that there's probably some kind of stress that we're all experiencing in some kind of way. But let's first talk about the kids, because I know you have some experience with them, and offer some insights and advice as well. What's happening with them as far as the gun violence issue?
As we're looking through our communities and seeing what's happening right now in terms of gun violence, some of the things that we take a look at, we try to look at risk factors. We try to see what are some of those factors that would actually increase a person's risk for a PTSD. And some of those factors are some of the very things that we see our kids witnessing, especially with the school violence and gun violence that we've all been seeing and witnessing on the news within the various communities. One of the major risk factors that increases PTSD is when you see another person hurt, or you seeing a person that has passed away. You feeling the horror, or you feeling helpless. There's a feeling of helplessness or extreme fear. And what we do know with the kids and with our youth that are going through some of the school shootings, those are some of the immediate factors that our kids are experiencing. So we already know for those kids dealing with that extra stress and dealing with, seeing the other students hurt or seeing someone that has passed away, we know that that's going to definitely have an impact on them. Some of the things that we see that would actually the children may be experiencing would be what we call guilt. Some experience a lot of guilt. It happened to my classmate. It didn't happen to me. Why am I a survivor? What made me? So some may be dealing with what we call intense guilt, feeling like that why did this not happen? Why did this skip over me? Did my friend have to pass away and I'm still here? Or my family member was hurt and I'm still here. So with PTSD, we see that there's a big, one of the big factors is dealing with that intense guilt. We also see that there's a disruption of mood, and that what that means is that person's whole mood, that person's aura. We see that their emotional level is disrupted. They may be calm on one day, and the next day they may be manicky the next day or depressed. So we see that there's a disruption of mood because what trauma does, it shocks the mind. And so you're unable to gather your rational thoughts. And so we see some with that heightened disruptive mood, they're unable to regulate their moods themselves. So we see that. We also see that if a person has experienced or doesn't have a lot of support after the event, that's one of the big risk factors. Now, one of the things that we're seeing with some of the young people, especially the Parkland shooting, is there's a lot of outreach that is happening for these young people. So that's one of the what we call resilience factors that we would want to look for, to see that there is some support and that the kids themselves are seeking support, or they're using the trauma of what has happened to try to help evoke change. Those are all some real good ways for them to be able to cope and to help with the coping mechanism through the traumas that they're experiencing.
I would think that there has to be an immense amount of fear that they have. And the thing about kids, even though we've seen this awesome display of courage that has come out in them to try to change the gun laws and things, they really have not learned, and like a lot of adults haven't either, learned to understand what they're going through enough to manage those emotions or those fears or those recurring thoughts that are damaging. And I would imagine on a daily basis, that's got to impact how schoolwork, it's got to impact how they deal with their families. And again, we can't disregard the fact that there are staff. There's probably fear there, maybe not quite as intense as it would be in children, because we, know that even though these are horrific events and it seems like a new normal, we have ways to think through those processes and just think about what would be protective measures and things like that would need to take place if something were to happen. But when you're dealing with these children, what are some of the common things you're going to say to them to help them, or is it just a matter of time and counseling that will help them reach a better stage with this all?
Well, there are various ways that we see treatment applied in this area. One, we see there's what we call psychotherapy, which is what we do. We can call it talk therapy. And some of the things that we try to do as we apply psychotherapy and working with the young people, we try to emphasize a lot of education about the symptoms that they're experiencing. We try to help teach new skills, help them to identify triggers of their symptoms, to be able to see that they're experiencing some PTSD symptoms. We also try to help give them skills to manage those symptoms. And so some of the helpful forms of therapy that we use is cognitive behavioral therapy. We call it CBT. And one of the ways that we use CBT is through a technique called exposure therapy. This helps people to be able to face and control their fears. We do know that when a person experiences trauma, fear is one of the major elements that a person is dealing with. And usually there's three ways when we have intense fear in a traumatic event that a person copes, and that's either a person's going to fight, they're going to be aggressive about it, they're going to flight, they're going to flee, or they're going to freeze. Those are the three ways that we see that a person copes. And freezing means that I'm paralyzed, I'm isolating myself, I don't want to go out and see anybody. It's almost like for that person, time doesn't literally stop, but time is no longer an important factor. This person is trying to protect themselves and isolate themselves. In the flight, this person is running. This person it's not facing. I can't face this thing, so I'm running. This is one of the areas that we see that substance abuse and different types of illicit behaviors come in to play, because a person is running from their trauma. And most of the time we run from something to something. So they're running from the fear or the impact of the trauma to something that's going to help bring comfort. And so that's when we see sometimes a lot of the illicit behavior. Then we have those that we say fight. And that person, we see that person is a little more aggressive towards, what has happened and expressing what has happened to them. And so we use what we call exposure therapy. And what exposure therapy does, it helps the person to be able to face and control their fear. And so we gradually expose them to the trauma, and it's on a gradual basis, and help them to re-experience it in a safe way for themselves. We use imaging, we use writing, we use pictures of not of the trauma itself, but of the place where it took place, and try to help the person to be able to deal and cope with their feelings around that. So that's one of the ways, and we call that exposure therapy. Of course, another way that we use is what we call cognitive restructuring, and this helps people make sense of their bad memories. So, sometimes people remember the event differently than how it happened. So we already talked about, that the person may be filled with guilt or shame about something. And so we try to help them to see that, one, it's not your fault. This is not something that you were in control of, and we try to help them to look at this in a more realistic way, so that they're not applying this to themselves. I should have done this, or I could have done that, and they're able to be able to restructure that thinking. Again, I told you it's about that mood that's been disrupted. And
Mm-hmm.
So we try to help them to find ways to be able to regulate that mindset. Because, again, that trauma is a shock to the mind. And so we try to make sure that we help them to be able to cope in those ways.
Well, we have a few minutes left. Here's what I want us to discuss, or you to, of course, reflect on. My guess is that the great majority who are impacted by this, and I'm thinking it's a pretty educated guess, are not going to receive actual clinical help. What I would like for you to share with us is how members of the community, family, others who are up close and personal to these children and their families, how we can respond to them in the most comforting and caring way. Because I imagine that there has to be depression, there has to be crying, all the other things that show up in an individual that express the hurt, the pain, the frustration, the lack of understanding, like we would going through any of our problems. And with this one being such an intense issue for them emotionally, and again, they won't seek out necessarily clinical help. Can you tell us what we can do if we can offer some type of, again, comfort and care to them, perhaps in a different kind of way? What is it that we can do?
One of the ways that we can help in our community is being able to help others to become aware. I was always taught that, in order to something to change, you have to become aware of it. So awareness is a good thing, especially within our community, to be able to educate about trauma and its effects. A lot of our kids, in dealing with traumatic events, have been labeled in other areas. So just being able to understand the difference between someone being delinquent and someone experiencing trauma. One of the ways, one of the new studies that's out, it's called ACEs, and it's helping kids, helping to be able to identify if you've experienced adverse childhood experiences and being able to put it in a healthy perspective. So being able to teach and help to educate about trauma, and being able to educate about the effects of trauma, being able to understand some of the symptomology of it, and then being able to educate. I'm sensing that that's what you're dealing with, you're struggling with. And I heard on the radio this lady, she was talking about trauma, and this sounds like some of those symptoms. Let's see what we can do to check that out. Another way is to help people to be able to identify and deal with their guilt, their shame, and other feelings about the event. Just being a listening ear. We may not have the answers. You don't have to have answers, but being able to be a sounding board and being able to listen to a person and reflectively listen, and helping them to just kind of be able to reflect back to them about their feelings, and that it's okay to be able to express how you feel about it. The other thing, the last thing I would say is making sure when we talk about educating others, the importance of sleep, the importance of diet, the importance of exercise, the importance of reestablishing some healthy habits. Those are very important ways just right off the bat that we can actually use to help others to be able to cope. And then we want to encourage others to be able to go into treatment and say, there's not a stigma there. Treatment really does work. And, it would be very beneficial and helpful to you in the healing process that you're going through.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that I would offer.
Well, yes, and definitely those are great insights and great advice. And I don't want to minimize the importance and the impact of holding somebody's hand, putting your arm around their shoulder, giving them a hug, letting them know that your love and support is available to them throughout the process of the healing as well. Those kinds of things work wonders when children, when adults realize that there really is someone there that they can lean on through times like this. Cassandra, I want to thank you very much for being my special guest today. Those are some very important things that you have talked about today, and I hope that it has given people a better understanding of what is going on. It's one thing to look at the news and see that perspective, but it narrows down to a lot of lives, a lot of homes, and a lot of children and families, communities that really are hurting in mental and emotional ways that most of us are not hearing about as regularly as we are the other things. So I want to thank you for opening up our eyes to what that all means and how we can successfully approach this going forward. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, continued success to you. I'll be back in touch.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye now. And I want to thank all of you as well for tuning in today. And as I said earlier in the show, I hope that this information is something that you can use. Perhaps you may know of someone who has been impacted in some kind of way. Maybe you share this information with them or share the show on social media. It certainly is a topic that we'll need to talk about again and again. I will look forward to talking to you again next time. I've got some other shows that are planned that I think are going to be, again, other important topics that you can use. In the meantime, I want you to be good, be blessed, be awesome. Have an amazing day.